Both the Orks and the Custodies go up for pre-order this weekend, and today we are looking on the greener side of things with some of the rules for the brand new detachments which are being shown off for the Orks. And on the face of it, we are looking at some fairly good stuff here. There is a significant amount of durability, a significant amount of damage, and just a splashing of that random Ork craziness that we all know and love. So from my perspective, I am really hyped for this codex, and I really can't wait to see what other shenanigans and tricks we get when the codex does drop. But straight out of the gate, we do get told that the current Warg tribe has been renamed to the War Horde, although we didn't get told exactly what this does, whether it's still the same. Currently, it gives sustained hits 1 in melee, which is okay, it's a nice buff, but it's nothing super amazing or exciting, especially when you compare it to the two we got shown today. And the first one of these is the Green Tide detachment, which, as you would expect from the name, is all about massive green waves of Ork boys. And they get a pretty spectacular buff, which is called Mob Mentality, which gives all of your boys units a 5-up invuln save, and in addition, when an Ork unit from your army has got more than 10 models, they get to reroll saving throws of 1 against enemy attacks. Now, currently, boys are just Ork boys. That's the only thing that has the boys keyword. It isn't beast snagger boys as well. That could well change with some new keyword updates in the new codex, but for current rules purposes, this just gives your regular standard Ork boys that 5-up invuln. However, any Ork unit with 10 or more models does get that reroll of saving throws of 1s. So that does extend to your Snagger Boys, it also extends to your Grots, and even things that come in 10 mans like your Nobs and your Looters, they will also get the ability to reroll those saving throws of 1s. So this is really fantastic for regular Ork Boys, and if you're running this detachment, you will likely be maxing out on your Ork Boys squads. But also it's going to be really good if you are running, squads of Nobs or Looters or even Snagger Boys. It will help them a little bit. So this is going to be your detachment if you are running huge amounts of infantry, huge big squads of Ork Boys, and you just want to get them up the board into combat as fast as possible with as many alive as possible. And they get helped by this even more with a couple of the enhancements and stratagems we got shown. Bulldozer Brutality is 1 CP, and that gives your Orks units in engagement range of an enemy a 3-inch engagement range, which means that even more of your boys can get stuck in, and even with those big 20-strong squads, you will likely, with this stratagem, be able to get pretty much all of them, if not definitely all of them, into combat, rather than being left out if they're too far back and the terrain has kind of got you crowded up a bit. On top of that, as you do inevitably lose a few boys as you're moving up the board, the other stratagem they show is Come On Lads. This is again 1 CP, and this gives you a little bit of regen. You get to return D3 plus 2 models to a boys unit in your command phase. So this is a minimum of 3, a maximum of 5 boys back in each of your battle rounds, and that is a solid 50 odd points back each time, so it's not a terrible use of a command point. And it does mean even with your bigger squads, you can regen them to get models back as you're going up the board, and then when you do get into combat, you can use that Bulldozer Brutality stratagem to make sure all 20 of them can actually swing. The enhancement Ferocious Show Off is one that's really nice for additionally helping your attached characters do even more. It gives them +1 strength to their weapons, whoever has the enhancement, or if the unit they've joined has 10 or more models, they get +3 to their strength. So now a war boss with a power claw will be strength 11 or strength 13 when they're in a big squad of boys. Now, these aren't the best breakpoints, to be fair, but it does mean that against tougher toughness 10 or toughness 12 vehicles and monsters and knights, you will be essentially getting +1 to wound them. Or alternatively, if you are going into Custodies and you're in a big squad of boys and you're strength 13, you will now be wounding them on 2s rather than 3s. So it is a bit of a niche enhancement, but it's not terrible. I think it would be nicer in some ways if it just gave the character that had it and his entire squad +1 strength, rather than that +3 if you're in a bigger squad. I think that would kind of be better, but it's not bad. I can't see it being the go-to one if there's a couple of other good options, but if you know you're going up against knights and you want a big killy war boss in a squad to go after them, that buff will help them do a little bit more as long as the rest of their squad is alive around them, so they get to strength 13. On the other hand though, if you like the more mechanized side of Orks, you can take the Dread Mob Detachment. This is all about mechs, death dreads, walkers and vehicles and everything like that, so it's going to include Killer Khans, death dreads, Gorkanauts and presumably even Stompers, and then on top of that, any unit that a mech joins, because of how keywords work in 10th, I presume, if it follows the same way that the keywords work as it does in Dark Angels and their Deathwing, any unit that a mech joins will become a mech unit, so they should in theory also get these buffs. If you put a mech in a unit of boys, they should be able to use the detachment rule. And what the ability is try that button. And you either roll a d6 whenever a mech unit, orc walker or grot vehicle unit shoots or fights, and then on a 1 or a 2 you get sustained hits 1, on a 3 or a 4 you get lethal hits, and then on a 5 or a 6 you get +2 to your AP on a critical wound. So they are fairly nice. I think +2 to your AP on a critical wound is probably the worst because that relies on you getting a 6 on your wound roll, but getting sustained hits or lethal hits is quite powerful. It is random though, so the other part is that you can instead choose the option you want, but then the weapons in your unit gain the hazardous keyword. So if you absolutely need lethal hits against some tough enemy unit like a knight, you can risk it, but you can of course then potentially blow yourself up afterwards. So it does have some of that orc randomness and unreliability too, which is fun to see, and all the buffs are okay. Again, I think the +2 to AP is the worst, but rolling a 1 to 2 to get sustained or 3 to 4 to get lethal is fairly good. So I actually can see myself rolling this quite often rather than choosing it just to avoid that hazardous detriment. But as I said, if you are going against a specific unit that needs sustained hits or lethal hits, you can risk it and choose it. You just do run the risk of hurting yourself afterwards. They can also massively boost their output further with a really quite nice stratagem, which is called Bigger Shells for Bigger Gits. This is again 1 CP, and again it targets a mech, orc walker or grot vehicle unit, and in your shooting phase, you get +1 to wound against a monster or vehicle, so you just get that for using the stratagem. It's a nice little +1 to wound buff, but you can also push it, and if you choose to do that, you get +1 damage to those attacks as well, but again, you gain the hazardous rule. So now potentially with this, if you chose to push it, a unit of 6 Killer Khans with rocket launchers, using the current profile anyway, could have 6 D3 shots at strength 9 with +1 to wound, -2 AP and 4 damage, and that would let them almost one-shot something like an enemy Space Marine Gladiator tank. You do just about 11 wounds to it with that +1 to wound and with flat 4 damage, so it can make your Orc Walkers pretty scary when you need them to be for a reasonably cheap 1 CP. And again, if you don't want to risk the hazardous, just getting +1 to wound on a unit for 1 CP isn't a terrible strat to have. Finally, we got a little tease at some of the other detachments. We didn't get any full details or rules, but we got told that the Cult of Speed, which is focused around your buggies and your trucks, they get a 4-up invuln if they go fast. So presumably that's going to be if you choose to advance with them. Whilst the Bully Boys detachment is all about your tougher infantry and your knobs, and they essentially get extra wargs to use on their units across the battle, so it will be more advancing, more charging, and just more crumping in general. All in all, I have to say it's looking pretty decent for the Orks. I like all the things that we've seen so far. I do have a couple of questions about possible changes. I don't know if the warg ability is going to stay exactly as it is. At the moment, it gives you that 5-up invuln and the advance and charge and a few extra little bonuses and benefits, but it is slightly odd if they keep the 5-up invuln aspect to it when that is basically invalidated by the entire Green Tide detachment, which gives it to all your boys. So I don't know if they're going to switch it up a little bit. I imagine it will largely stay the same and at the very least give you some kind of defensive bonus as well as that turn of advancing and charging and just hitting a bit harder. But that is going to be it for the Orks today. What do you make of the rules we've seen, and which of the two detachments we got shown do you think looks best, the Green Tide or the Dread Mob? Let me know all of your thoughts and ideas down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later guys.